Hi again everyone, I'm back to read chapter 2 of Beetle Boy. In chapter 1 we were introduced to Darkus, whose father had mysteriously gone missing from inside a vault at the Natural History Museum, and Darkus has moved in with his uncle Maximilian, who is an archaeologist. So, chapter 2, King Ethelred Hall. Darkus peered through the spiked railings that ran along the front of King Ethelred Hall High School. It was an enormous Gothic building with brooding gargoyles sprouting from its many corners. Darkus took in the narrow windows, soot-stained brickwork and graffiti. The playground looked like the exercise yard from a prison film. His old school wasn't perfect, but at least it had a playing field. He had hoped this school would be better than the one he was dumped in for 3 weeks while staying at the foster home. That had been rough. Uncle Max had said that you didn't get to choose which school you went to if you applied at the wrong time. You got sent to a school that had room for you. Darkus had learnt that the schools with free spaces tended to be the bad ones. He stared at King Ethelred Hall. If you counted his old one, this was his third school in 5 weeks. 5 weeks since Dad had last walked him to school. Darkus clenched his teeth. He couldn't get upset just before going into a new school. People would stare. He thought about what Uncle Max had said. Grit and determination, he whispered to himself. And, taking a deep breath, he walked through the school gates. At morning registration, Darkus was made to stand at the front of the class and introduce himself to a sea of uninterested faces. A tall girl called Virginia Wallace was appointed to look after him. Her hair was pulled into 8 black dandelion clocks, each held tightly by a brightly coloured elastic band. She pouted as she looked him up and down, obviously unimpressed with her new duty. Sitting next to her was a small boy who was so pale he looked ill. He wore large framed glasses and had a shock of white frizzy hair. The boy held out his hand and shook Darkus's as he sat down at the empty desk behind them. Just show you the picture that's on there now. Virginia and the other boy. Hi, I'm Bertold Roberts. Darkus mumbled back his name, taken aback by the boy's formal handshake and keen smile. At break time, Darkus was the first one out of the classroom. He strode out into the playground, finding himself wandering towards a giant tree. The trunk of solid oak was tattooed with hearts and names carved into the bark by knives and compasses, and leaning against it was a muscular boy with a quiff rising from his forehead like a rhino's horn. His shirt was unbuttoned at the neck, framing a chunky gold chain. The knot of his purple and black striped tie hung at his waist. A gaggle of smaller boys clambered around him, trying and failing to lean against the tree in the same casual manner. "Have you worked out who the losers are yet?" he called out. "Yeah, you don't want to get stuck with Big Bird and Einstein," sneered a red-haired boy with a mouthful of braces. The gaggle of boys tittered. "Want to come for a puff?" the boy with the quiff asked, cocking his head. "No, thanks." Darkus walked on. The red-haired boy ran up and fell into step beside him. "All right, I'm Robbie." "All right, Robbie, I'm Darkus." "Yeah, I know. Listen, it ain't clever to turn down an invite from Daniel Dowie, you see. You won't get asked twice. I'm only telling you 'cause, you're new." "Thanks, but I don't smoke." "Maybe you should take it up." Robbie grinned, a mouthful of metal. "No, thanks." "Don't know why Daniel's interested in you anyways. It probably ain't true what they're saying," Robbie said, watching Darkus move away. "What's not true?" Darkus stopped. "About your dad." Every muscle in Darkus's body tensed. "That he's dead." Robbie leaned forward, searching Darkus's face for a response. "Is he? Is he dead?" "He's not dead." "Then where is he?" "I don't know," Darkus stammered. Perhaps he got tired of being your dad. Robbie laughed nastily. No, we reckon he's dead. Probably murdered. Darkus clenched his fists. Say that again and I'll thump you. Ooh, I'm really scared. Robbie cowered away from Darkus and then laughed. Darkus's dad's dead. Darkus's dad's dead. Darkus felt a surge of fire in his chest and he lurched forward, but before he could swing his fist at Robbie's face, two strong hands grabbed his upper arms, holding him back. Easy, Tiger, Virginia said, without loosening her grip. You're a loser, just like your friends, Robbie said to Darkus as he backed away from Virginia, looking scared. You're all a bunch of losers! He ran back to the tree and the raucous chattering of the other boys. Are you okay? Virginia let go of Darkus's arms. Darkus glared at her. You should have let me hit him. He made me stop you. She nodded over her shoulder to where Bertold was standing, blinking at them. But you should thank him. He did you a favour. Bertold shuffled forwards to stand beside Virginia, smiling shyly. Robbie's a grass, Virginia explained. You'd have spent your first week outside the headmaster's office, and that little rat wouldn't have laughed in your face every day. Oh, and that little rat would have laughed in your face every day. She should know, Bertold piped up. She walloped him a couple of weeks ago. Virginia grinned like a Cheshire cat, and then, seeing something over Darkus's shoulder, said, Uh-oh, Robbie's talking to the clones. Come on, let's get out of here before he returns with backup. Robbie likes pushing people around, Bertold explained, in a series of squeaks as they hurried away. Virginia clobbered him because he threw me in one of the big bins down Stink Alley and wouldn't let me get out. He stumbled, and Darkus caught his arm. Hi, Chester. He stumbled, and Darkus caught his arm. Bertold smiled gratefully. Thanks. There isn't a boy in this school I can't whoop in a fight, Virginia said defiantly. Darkus believed her. Thanks for stopping me. You know, from getting me into trouble. If you weren't new, I'd have let you smack him, Virginia growled. Robbie's a weasel. Would you like to have lunch with us? Bertold asked. Sure, Darkus nodded. Thanks. Bertold and Virginia were as different as peanut butter and jam, but tight as friends can be. They finished each other's sentences and spoke to each other with looks. Darkus had never made that kind of friend, because he couldn't talk about the things in his head. He couldn't explain the chasm of fear that had opened up inside of him when his mum had died, or the terrible nightmares he had about his dad. But as he listened to their banter, he envied Bertold and Virginia's closeness. Virginia had the build of a featherweight boxer and skin the colour of cinnamon sticks. She was loud, animated, and talked 10 to the dozen. As they entered the dining hall, she told Darkus about her family. Her 3 older siblings, David, Sean and Serena, and 2 younger, Kesha and Darnell. I'm the middle child. She pulled her lunchbox from her satchel. Mum says I've got the syndrome. She threw it down on the table with a clatter and slid onto a chair. What syndrome? Darkus asked, sitting opposite. The one where you have to be a famous explorer or sail around the world to get noticed. She's not afraid of anything, Bertold said proudly as he took out his blue Tupperware lunchbox and sat down beside Virginia. Or anyone. My brothers are why I can fight, Virginia explained, stuffing her mouth with crisps. Sean's always trying to beat me, but he can't, she went on, spraying crisp crumbs across the table. Unfortunately, Bertold said, one white eyebrow arched with disapproval, she hasn't got any manners. Bertold was as pale as chalk, with a neat body and a head that looked disproportionately large due to his springy hair and enormous glasses. Darkus soon realised how he'd got the nickname Einstein. He was the ultimate science geek. He described his hobby as constructing working prototypes of new inventions that throw fire or explosives. Like Darkus, Bertold was an only child. He lived with his mother in a compact flat, in a block not far from the school. Bertold nags a lot. Virginia poked him. Hates it when I talk with my mouth full. He has dinner round ours when his mum's working, and that's all I hear. Only pigs eat with their mouths open. She mimicked Bertol's high-pitched voice. Bertol blushed, and Darcus, seeing his unhappy face, changed the subject. Your mum works at night? She's an actress, Bertold explained. Her name's Callista Bloom. Have you heard of her? No, sorry. Darcus shrugged apologetically. No one has. Bertold fed small bits of Marmite sandwich into the side of his mouth. You won't have seen her on TV unless you watch adverts about people who fall over at work, although you might have heard her. She does the voice of the annoying bunny rabbit on Bazonka's Bath Time. Darcus shook his head, pulling a knotted carrier bag from his rucksack. I don't really watch much TV. Mum mostly does theatre. She was in a play when she had me. I'm named after a playwright. Pity she didn't think how it might ruin your life and get you thrown in bins, Virginia snorted. I don't think that was because of my name, Bertold frowned. I like it, Darcus said. He pulled a spoon from his coat pocket and tore a hole in his carrier bag. It's unusual, but in a good way. Thanks, Bertold beamed, and then looked puzzled as Darcus dipped his spoon into the hole in the carrier bag. What are you eating? It's my Uncle Max's special fried rice. Try some. It's really tasty. Darcus held the spoon out towards Bertold. I told him a packed lunch should be sandwiches, but there was no time to make them this morning, so he gave me a bag of rice. Bertold refused the rice with a little shake of his head. So, Virginia cleared her throat. What happened to your dad then? Virginia! Bertold gave her a thump and looked apologetically at Darcus. I'm so sorry. What? Come on! Everyone's talking about it. Virginia threw her hands in the air. If I don't ask, someone else will. It's okay. Perhaps if I tell you, people will ask you about it instead of me, he sighed. I'd like it if they stopped staring at me. You were in the papers. Chester's come to listen to the story as well. Hiya, haven't you? You're in the papers and on the news, Bertold pointed out. That makes you kind of famous. Yeah, well, not anymore. Darcus looked at the table. They can't keep writing about a mystery that has no solution. So tell us, what happened? Virginia leant in, all ears. There's nothing much to tell. My dad went to work like normal, and at some time in the afternoon, no one knows when, he vanished, Darcus said in a matter-of-fact way. I realised something was wrong when he didn't come home. Bertold sucked in his breath. There must be more to it than that, Virginia prodded. No one knows what happened, Darcus continued. The police found no clues, and that's all there is to it. My dad just disappeared. Perhaps he's a spy, Virginia suggested helpfully. He could be saving the country from terrorists right now. Darcus shook his head. He's not a spy. He's the director of science at the Natural History Museum. Wow, said Bertold, his eyes lighting up. I love the Natural History Museum. Do you get to go there a lot? Darcus nodded. In the school holidays. It'd be better if he was a spy, Virginia grumbled. Tell that to your own dad, Bertold scolded. Turning back to Darcus, he added, he's an accountant. I'm just saying, if he was a spy, it would have explained the whole disappearing thing. Virginia huffed. I've got to stay with Uncle Max until Dad comes back, Darcus said. That's why I'm at this school. When Dad comes home, everything will go back to the way it was before. What about your mum? Bertold asked. Why aren't you staying with her? Mum died of pneumonia when I was 7, Darcus replied quietly. Oh no. Bertold cupped his hands over his face in dismay. That's awful. You think your dad will come back? Virginia asked. I know he will. Darcus felt certain of this fact, that he sat bolt upright. People say he ran away or he's dead, but he's not. I know he's not. There's no packed suit, no note. Nothing's missing. There's no dead body, and he's my dad. I know him. He would never leave me, not like that. He heard his voice become muffled with emotion, and he knew if he said any more he'd cry. He paused and swallowed. Wherever he is, he's worried sick about me. Of course he is, Bertold agreed furiously. And I bet he's an excellent dad. But there's something else. Darkus looked at Virginia and lowered his voice. I know my dad is alive because Uncle Max isn't acting like he's dead. What do you mean? She whispered back. Uncle Max looks worried and like he's thinking about things, but he isn't sad at all. In fact, sometimes I think he's more angry than anything else. So what do you think did happen? Virginia asked, leaning across the table, keeping her voice low. I think he's been kidnapped. Darkus checked both their faces to see if they believed him. Kidnapped? Bertold gasped. Brilliant! Virginia's eyes grew wide. I mean, obviously not for you, but a real-life kidnapping? That's brilliant! The police don't believe me. They've added his name to a missing persons list and stopped looking. They say some people don't want to be found, but... He paused, thinking about whether or not he should tell them the rest. But what? Virginia pressed. Me and Uncle Max, we started our own investigation. Darkus looked deathly serious. And we're going to find Dad ourselves. I'll help. Virginia sat up. We both will, won't we, Bertold? She tugged at his sleeve. If you want us to, that is. Bertold shot Virginia a disapproving look. This is fantastic. A real adventure. I've always wanted to be a detective. She jumped to her feet and pulled her homework notebook from her blazer pocket. We should interview you now and get your story of what happened on the day your dad disappeared, just in case you get amnesia and you forget anything. Virginia might be good at fighting, Bertold said to Darkus, but she's as blunt as a spoon. He shook his head. It's that middle child syndrome. Ha ha! Virginia stuck her tongue out at Bertold. Darkus laughed. It felt good to have people finally believing him. He looked at Bertold and Virginia, quarrelling on the other side of the table, and realised it had been a long time since he'd shared anything with children his own age. It couldn't hurt to let them help. The more people that were looking for his father, the better. Okay, Darkus said. You're in. Yes! Virginia punched the air. You won't regret it. Bertold stood up beside Virginia. We will do our best to find your dad. Looking from Bertold to Virginia, an unfamiliar warmth blossomed in Darkus's chest, and he surrendered to the smile tugging at the edges of his mouth. Thanks, he said. That's it for chapter 2. Hopefully we'll get chapter 3 up for you soon. Take care. Bye.